occupy anyway. We should take all these out. actually read.
Wait, did you actually bring the bottle?
I did.
Are we gonna drink it?
I think so.
Awesome. I thought it was a joke.
No, it's not.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to our show, Cooking the Technical and Social, Steamy Recipes for Gender, Environment and Development Research. Sounds tasty. So in this show, we're going to be showcasing some of the gender projects that we have across the centres. And we have a big panel audience, loads of chefs today to help us cook up this recipe that we're brewing. So maybe actually we can go along and people could introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Kalpana Giri. I'm a research fellow within SEI ACS Center, primarily working on gender, environment and development cluster. I'm also a trained forester, so my master's and PhD is also in forestry, and I work on gender by choice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Han Nguyen, a research associate for Asia Center, the same research cluster. Oh yeah. Yeah. My title will officially change by June, so it's not June yet. Yeah. I totally forgot what I'm trying to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm Manan Van Canel. I'm from the SEI US Center based in the Davis office. I work in water resources and modeling work. I haven't yet explicitly worked on gender projects, but I'm happy to be part of this panel to bring the perspective of a modeler and also represent my colleagues Marisa and Laura, who have been active in this initiative and are based in the office.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Ghosh and I'm an energy modeler working out of the SEI US Center, and I've also been involved in some gender studies, also by choice.
Hello everyone, my name is Kerli and I'm from SCI Tallinn, and I'm mainly working with climate and energy topics, but I'm also combining this with other environmentally related issues such as gender, and I'm also doing energy modeling, so yay, woman power.
Hi, I'm Richard Taylor from the Oxford office. Work mainly on climate change, recently on gender, but I think there are quite some strong links between the two issues.
So we also have a special guest joining us a bit later, so it's a surprise, you'll see.
Much later.
Much later. Also, some of our participants have been a bit shy, and they actually have some culinary experience. So Richard used to work in a fish and chip shop, for example. It was his first job. And Emily worked for 10 years in a chocolate and ice cream shop, which is quite exciting. So they'll be bringing those skills into this show as well. So let's get this show cooking.
Right, thanks, Natalia. My name is Babette Resurrection, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a senior research fellow at the SEI Asia office, and I work on gender by choice, by profession, by background, by discipline. So all of the above. So today we're going to cook, and as I was telling some people here who came early, looking at what we're wearing, we're claiming the stereotype. Women love to cook, as well as men, but we're wearing an apron now. Okay, so why cooking the technical and the social? Yeah, the idea behind this title, this focus, is really, well, as you saw, the panel, the composition of our panel, most of them come from a modeling background. So it's really marrying the technical and the social. Is it possible? What are the issues? And in fact, so many have said that gender has always been such an afterthought when it comes to environmental issues. And there are some explanations. Some quarters actually say that it's because of discrimination against women, okay, against the social issue of gender. But of late, interestingly, there have been emerging research literature that actually says, well, hang on a minute, look at the technical sciences and the professions. In the first place, yeah, they have traditionally bracketed out social issues. That has been the training. So that is one explanation why somehow gender and social issues have become an afterthought. So this is one of the issues that we're going to focus in the conversation for this afternoon. Okay, so we will start with a video. And this is a video of our two colleagues who are not here, unfortunately, and they are in the US, the US Center, from the US Center, one from Davis and they're both from Davis, and they actually came up with a guidance note just released about 2 weeks ago on using gender and social equity in modeling. This Marisa Escobar as well as Laura Forney, they came out with a guidance note for SEI colleagues who are into using the tools WEEP and LEAP, but this time with a difference, yeah? Integrating gender. It's been a monumental task, so they will share their experience around the guidance note.
Hello, my name is Laura Forney from the Stockholm Environment Institute.
And hello, I'm Marisa Escobar, also from the Stockholm Environment Institute.
And today we're going to share with you the work that we've been doing in integrating gender and social equity aspects into modeling activities, in particular related to water resources management.
For the last 20 years, we've been helping water managers around the world in the use of the water evaluation and planning system, which is a software that helps them in doing long-term planning. For the last few years, we've been incorporating more of participatory approaches to have all the stakeholders present their views into these water planning processes through a robust decision support. This has created also an opportunity to interact more directly with our stakeholders and also to integrate gender and social equity along with the initiative within SEI.
As part of this program last year, we sent out a survey to WEEP users around the world. We asked them if they consider gender and social equity in their projects. 7% only said yes, over 200 responses. We also asked them if we should include gender and social equity in the modeling activities, and 88% of those responses said yes, that we should.
The results of this survey motivated us in creating a demand-driven gender guidance. This guidance helps in mainstreaming gender into our water management projects, which means that we can do common practice by integrating gender in our projects and focusing on three main aspects: integrating gender in our technical work, being more inclusive in the participation of women in the project, and using our projects as opportunities to gather gender data. Currently, we are implementing a project in Bolivia to do a national water balance. This is a highly technical project. However, thanks to all the work we've done on gender and social equity and through the guidance, we are implementing some of the advice that comes from this document. In particular, just mentioning to our partners that we have an interest in including gender into our projects. And that has created a very nice response from some of our partners. In particular, Lina Terrazas is a young professional who works in Cochabamba, and she is helping us in imagining what kind of tutorial we can develop using a case study of a particular application in Bolivia.
Thanks to this opportunity, we got in touch with Lina, and she shared with us the details of the project of Marquina. Marquina is a town with 200 families in Bolivia where water managers are implementing a set of strategies. These strategies relate to, one, the construction of a canal for better distribution of water, and 2, the implementation of technology for irrigation efficiency. These 2 strategies would allow the current agricultural producers to improve the yield of their production, and also it would allow them to expand their agricultural areas. Usually, the implementation of these strategies required a setup of a regulatory framework. For example, for the distribution of water through the canal, especially in dry years, they need a system of water rights. So we're going to examine the difference in gender and social equity related to the implementation of these strategies and regulatory frameworks, especially how it relates to the requirements for the different setup of water rights and also to the affordability issues related to the implementation of tariffs. So why are we doing this? Because even though these projects are signals of progress and development, and they can benefit the society overall, if there are any existent inequalities in that system, they could easily be reinforced with these strategies. So our hope is to make sure that they are analyzed beforehand. SEI contribution is to ensure that these exclusions or inequalities do not happen as a result of technical progress related to water management.
So that is the vision of this effort, that we can create a tutorial based on a case study that, although it's very local to Bolivia, is very similar to the circumstances in other parts of the world. And this tutorial will be available to all of the WIP users, about 25,000 different users around the world that have access to WIP and are always looking for new ways in which they can apply it. So we are excited to know that this material is going to be useful for them, and it's going to help them in thinking about gender into water management processes, in particular through the integration of gender components into the work and also being more inclusive in having women participate on this process. This is what we wanted to share with you today, all of our progress in terms of the gender and social equity.
And we invite you to check out the guidance. We included a link in the description of this video. And also, please send your comments below. We look forward to continue sharing the development of a WIP tutorial chapter based on Marquina.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's Marisa and Laura. You can check the SEI website, actually. It's now available. It's in the Gender and Social Equity web pages. So I must also add, by the way, this is not only, the guidance note is not only on the use of WIP or water resources management, but it is also for energy decision-making and management. So Emily Gosh here was also very much involved in the making of the guidance note, as well as our energy colleagues in the Boston office, if I'm right. Yes, okay. So let's get the ball rolling. I think Laura mentioned something quite noteworthy, and if I may quote her, she said, technical interventions, for that matter, water and energy facilities and infrastructure, may actually heighten gender and social inequalities, perhaps inadvertently, or I wouldn't think by design, but perhaps it may actually exacerbate existing inequalities. So the point is actually not to exacerbate, but in fact, if at all possible, to actually transform and change and alter ways of managing water and energy. So I'd like to use this quote of Laura to actually ask Emily, Manon, and Curly about your own respective projects. What are the forms of gender inequality your projects have actually uncovered? And if you may share more with us, how do your projects actually propose to gain more empowering benefits equally for both women and men? I would like to ask Manon first.
Yeah, so that's a very good quote from Laura, and I think it is relevant to the work we do. I work in water resources, and specifically in Latin America. I've done a lot of work in Latin America, and usually the kinds of projects that we do involve a lot of stakeholder engagement and capacity building, and that's where I've noticed personally a lot of gender inequity. just in the representation of women in the meetings that we have, the workshops that we have in Latin America. We show up, and there's maybe there's less than a third of participants in the workshops and the trainings are women, and mostly that third are secretaries or cooks or waitresses. So it's a little disheartening to see the lack of representation of women in those settings. And when there is representation of women in those meetings, they often don't participate as much as the men, or they don't feel empowered to speak up and share their perspectives. So at SEI, when we start a project in Latin America, we always tell that our project partners that we have a gender and social equity initiative, which in Latin America is, they're surprised to hear that we have this focus, and sometimes it's good just for them to hear it. But one thing is saying it, and the other thing is acting on it. So we often don't have much control over who we invite to these trainings and workshops. But when we do, we try to really invite young women professionals who we see in who we see a lot of potential, and actually 3 of our 4 associates in Latin America are women. So we try to empower young women in Latin America to be in those positions, and more broadly, I think the comment from Laura about how certain strategies can exacerbate existing gender and power inequities is very true. And one example in Latin America that we've come across is in terms of the disparity between representation of small farmers versus larger agricultural farmers. And when it comes to designing a new canal or defining new water rights, the smaller farmers don't really have a say, don't have as much power to define those situations, and then they just continue to be written off and have to resort to other ways of getting water. So those are just some examples that I've come across in my personal experience on these projects. There's a lot of other water-related gender inequities. My colleagues from the Boston office who worked in the Middle East and Africa have told me about situations in which the burden of getting water, of acquiring water for a household, is on the women and children, which requires time and energy. So there's also that aspect. Regarding the capacity building and workshop participation of women, in discussing this with Lena, who was mentioned in the video, we realized, or we came to the understanding that even if we want to include more women in these situations, there's oftentimes a lack of women who have the adequate background to actually participate. So we want to try to go to local schools and empower young girls to go into career fields that are more science and technical oriented, so that when it comes to making decisions and offering perspectives from women, there will be women who have the background and are empowered to do so. Emily?
Yeah, so similarly for energy, there's a lot of similarities between water and energy. And I guess one of the main gender inequalities that are experienced in the energy sector is access to energy, particularly in households. If we think about even here or within our own households, we rely on energy for lighting and for cooking. If we were to take away electricity, for example, and within a lot of developing economies, for cooking they utilize biomass, and that requires a lot of effort to actually go out, collect the wood. There's oftentimes violence that could be associated with even going out, especially if it's a woman who's going to collect the wood. There's also health implications, air pollution, if there's no ventilation within your household and stuff like that. So there's tremendous issues associated with not having access to clean, reliable energy or electricity. We also rely on electricity for our entertainment needs, as well as dishwashing or washing clothes and air conditioning, especially with temperature increases. We need, we need air conditioners or fans and that sort of thing. However, when energy systems are designed and where energy access is prioritized, it's primarily going towards industries and commerce, and oftentimes households are kind of second in priority. And so these industrial sectors are primarily where, say, men are involved, and so they often reap the benefits of increased productivity and increased energy access. And so traditionally, energy planning has been quite gender blind. There's a failure to recognize the needs of women, particularly women who are in households, as well as low-income people who primarily rely on subsistence, agriculture, and so there's this lack of prioritization in the energy sector to ensure adequate energy access to households. And that's sort of on the energy demand side of the equation. Then there's the other side of the supply, and a lot of that has been discussed as well, how hydropower, the building of hydropower infrastructure can impact families who might need to get displaced, as well as increase in, say, pollution in the waterways, and so that can also have an impact on livelihoods. Additionally, fossil fuel extraction can also disrupt families and neighborhoods. So a lot of these issues are really known amongst development experts, but energy planners don't seem to know how to incorporate this into their planning processes. So what we're trying to do within our projects is emphasize these gender implications of designing energy plans and energy infrastructure. So one of the projects that I've recently worked on in partnership with the World Resources Institute in India, we looked at using LEAP, which is the energy sector planning tool. We looked at a more bottom-up approach to modeling, focusing on where the demands are for energy and looking at how we can improve access, electricity access to low-income and families and women. So that was kind of really interesting, a very interesting project, because it was one of a kind for energy planners to really look at energy planning from the demand side more than the supply side. And so this is one of the ways to kind of include gender aspects when we're doing energy planning. One of the other things that we want to really look at is how do these planning processes actually impact women. So as part of the GSE program, we're looking at how we can quantify some of these impacts, like air pollution impacts, and also some of the lost time that women have by not having access to electricity, and how we can quantify that within LEAP. And also, and more importantly, a lot of what we do within our energy modeling program is capacity building. So building the capacity of energy planners and introducing them to these concepts of gender-related issues to energy. So as what Laura and Marissa talked about within the WEEP programming, we're trying to do something similar with LEAP and building a training program for energy planners to understand the issues related to gender impacts and incorporating them into their planning through the use of LEAP. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for what you shared about the work with LEAP. Now I'd like to turn to Hurley.
So yeah, what are the forms of gender inequality that the project I was involved with uncovered? The project I was involved with in SCI Tallinn was part of the Gender and Equality Initiative, which was led by Babette. And our project focused on the agriculture and forestry sector of Estonia, and we particularly look at the pay gap issue within those sectors. And the scoping study lasted for 6 months, and the aim of that study was to actually find out a bigger research question that we could go on with in the future. So the scoping study demonstrated a few interesting things that may have a global significance. So first of all, that the gender pay gap tends to be a statistical phenomenon because Estonia actually has the largest pay gap among the EU countries. It's 30%. And currently there is statistics available only for the unadjusted gender pay gap, which means that only the average salaries are compared. So the numbers say that Estonia has the biggest gender pay gap, but we still need to go and explore where this is coming from. So with our project, we therefore wanted to focus on the factors that actually cause this gender pay gap. And EU has listed 6 main groups of factors that help to analyze the causes of gender pay gap. And these factors are, for instance, like personal factors, work-related, institutional, organizational, as well as social norms and trends, and also gender segregation. But however, these factors must not be taken as anything goes, because also the EU has stated that in their documents that there might be also other factors, but these 6 groups just help to analyze the main causes behind the gender pay gap. And also the factors might be all interlinked, and there might be loads of factors with what are difficult to measure. So secondly, the examples that we used in our study when we focused on the agriculture and forestry sector demonstrated that one of the main reasons in Estonia behind the gender pay gap is the gender segregation, because Estonia not only doesn't have the highest pay gap among the EU member states, but Estonia also is #1 in terms of gender segregation. So that means that there are men's jobs and women's jobs, and if we compare the average salaries only, then this will be translated as gender pay gap. But we still need to go and explore the factors behind it, and currently there is a lack of data to do so. So when we looked at the agriculture and forestry sectors in Estonia, then it turned out that there are not enough women working within the forestry sector, and we compared the salaries of the same professions and compared the average salaries, but since there is not enough women working in the forestry sector and we compared the average salaries, then we still need to explore where is this coming from, because there might be still, for instance, one woman working as a machine operator in the forestry sector and still earn less than male. So we can't just compare the average salaries, but altogether. And that leads me to the third important outcome, which is that based on our expert workshop discussion that we held within this scoping study, there was a common agreement that we proposed the next study to focus on organizational level, because that would actually help us to compare more comparable things, and it would allow us to give more concrete examples in terms of what are the causes behind the gender pay gap. And in terms of the second question, what we propose as to reduce the gender pay gap, then in Estonia, I think that since Estonia has also the very long maternity leave compared to other European countries, we need the support system to upgrade the expertise of women quickly so that we can help them to return back to their jobs and not lose their qualifications when they stay home with their kids. And this could also include paternal leave in equal terms, and also professional training schemes provided by the employers for returning moms. And the other issue is also the gender segregation, which in Estonia is a big problem. So we need to focus on that and upgrade the education system, and also to raise general awareness, because it actually already starts from the kindergarten, how the girls are thinking and how they are in a way secretly directed to sectors more suitable for women. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much to the three of you. I understand that you brought special ingredients for our dish today. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes.
Okay.
So my ingredients are these 2 cups of water. They're not for drinking. So I work in water resources, and this was an easy thing, water. But I brought 2 cups because we're talking about gender. And so if we include women and underrepresented communities, we get double the results, because there's 2 glasses. So I'll bring them over.
Thank you, man. And imagine all the way from California. Are you sure they made you? Did they make you pass through security? Emily?
So one of the things that through greater energy access, we're hoping that women will have more time to dedicate to other things that are like other opportunities, such as getting better education or more employment opportunities. So, as part of my ingredient, I've actually been able to bottle up time. So it's quite delicate, so you have to take care of it, but that's what I've managed. It looks like a regular water bottle, but it's actually
Women's time. Can we pour it into the? We can.
I also managed to buy time as well.
Okay. Thanks, Curly.
So what do we have here? It's wood all the way from Estonia. And that wood represents the issue of gender segregation, and explicitly in the forestry sector that we have more men than women working in the forestry sector at the moment. So the arrow sign also represents the pay gap in general. And here we have woman. So this is the woman, and since we want more women working in the forestry sector, and we want to decrease gender segregation, then this is more women coming in. So we want to be equal.
Okay, thanks. Are you sure that's edible?
That's very edible.
We'll take your word for it. Fantastic. Secret. Okay, thanks. Let's give them a hand, the 3 of them, for the first round. Okay, for the next round, I think the word empowerment has been floating around the different discussion groups and since yesterday. So we will actually now focus on it, as well as food security. I think in the earlier bioeconomy session here, I was dropping in, and I did hear that food security was going to be a concern of the proposed initiative. So this round of discussion will be on those two buzzwords, empowerment as well as food security. And I'd first like to start with yeah, with a question. But before your question, I think you have something to show us. Oh, you want me to ask the question first? All right, I'll ask then. From your research project, do you find that women can be empowered in their traditional roles as caretakers and food providers, such as us here now, as cooks? Please.
Yeah. Now, to answer the question, I would like to kind of quickly introduce about the research project that we did last year with the World Vegetable Center, just to give a little bit of flavor what the project is about. Is it? Yeah. Okay. So so we together with the World Vegetable Center conduct a gender assessment in home garden project. What the project is about? It's about the project try to increase the nutritional status for children under 5 by helping families family which have children under 5 to establish home garden and to grow vegetable on their garden. So the project what the project do is to provide seed pack. So this is a seed pack. Yeah, they select 10 special kind of crop that should be grown in the garden, which have high nutritional status, nutritional intake, and also provide training for women. Yeah, so 2 key things. Provide 3 things, providing seed pack, giving women training on how to establish a home garden and how to take care of the garden, and training on how to prepare food that retain nutrition, for the family and for children. So the project targets that the participant in the project, 80% of participants are women, of course. And the project assumed that by targeting women and by giving women training on gardening and nutrition, then that women will be empowered, right? So our research is to to understand or to see whether women are really empowered through this whole activity or not. So basically, we challenge that assumption, and we argue that empowerment is not about building capacity for women to do what they are supposed to do. Empowerment is about enable women to challenge norm and stereotype, gender roles, for example, that confine women in their reproductive domain, for example. Challenge, yeah. So development interventions such as this nutrition project actually premise on women's reproductive role or caring role, feeding the family, taking care of children. Therefore, they help women to perform their role better, but not to change that gender norms or gender practices that confine women in kind of the subordinate position compared to men. But we also look at another dimension of power, which is a power relation between women as a project target group and project actors, namely project manager, trainers, facilitators. So the project, by setting up rules such as who can be involved in this project, what kind of seed that they should plant in the garden, what kind of training they should receive, how the training should be organized, for example. They impose the project, impose power over the project recipient. So in that sense, women are not empowered during the project implementation process, or other words, the interaction with, so they are not empowered, in conclusion.
Okay.
And, let's stop it for
Are
now.
you sure you didn't get into trouble with the World Vegetable Center with those conclusions?
A little bit. Yeah, because it's quite kind of, it challenged the whole, they feel that they are attacked by the project critic or the project, the research finding. Yeah.
Are they going to do anything about it?
We recommend the two empowerment pathway. One is to challenge the gender norms that confine women in garden and in the kitchen. And another pathway is to change the power dynamic between women as a target group and the project actors. Under those pathways, there's several activities, but they pick up one thing, which is they will try to organize a kind of a regular meeting where they can have more interaction with women as a gardener and listen to what they say.
Thank you. Hang on to your questions. We will have a session later on Q&A, also for questions for Manon, Emily, as well as Curly. I'd like now to address the next question to Richard. Richard, you did a discussion brief recently on the SDGs and food security as well as gender. Now, my question is, why should achieving food security depend on women's empowerment, since we've been talking about empowerment? What about the role of men?
Could I say something about the first question first? Would that be okay? So I think that women's empowerment is really key to achieving food security. And you can see this very clearly on a household level, where women are often responsible for growing the food to sustain the family and also preparing. Often they're the ones that are preparing the food. And so therefore, any initiatives that can empower women can increase their influence over decision making and improve their position in the household will go a long way towards improving food security. So in the study that you mentioned, we found one example in a case study in South Africa, where households that were headed by women, empowered women, were more likely to be more food secure. There's also an interesting, there's been quite a lot of research on this, and there's quite an interesting report by the Asian Development Bank, and they claim that gender equality is the single most important determinant of food security. But we also found that the link goes the other way too. So better food security implies better gender equality in improving the role of improving the situation of women and girls. For example, improving food security can help in also ending violence towards women. So, for example, if food's not available or if food's not prepared on time, this can lead to intra-household tensions and ultimately violence towards women. An example of this link was a study in Ecuador which showed that a cash food transfer program that was implemented in Ecuador, this program also led to reduction, improvements in ending violence towards women. This is an example where a process or policy in one area, such as food security, can have an impact in another area too, like women's empowerment and gender equality. But we also found in the study that there were also negative impacts. Sometimes you can have positive impacts, positive interactions, but you can also have negative or constraining interactions. And in the study, so we did a literature review of the Web of Science, and we actually found 27 articles on this very topic of the interaction between food security and women's empowerment. And we actually found that most of the interactions were positive, the majority of them. Now we can't really say what motivates, how the researchers, how academics select their case studies that they want to work on, or what filters act on what they publish. But the fact that we found so many articles really emphasizes that this is quite a big issue, and that this interaction is very, very strong between these two areas. So lots of evidence about interactions, and this type of research, I think, can really help to highlight potential gaps in knowledge or further research questions. And on the other hand, it can also, we hope it can inform policymakers to what sort of problems they may face in implementing these types of policies, aiming towards food security or gender equality or both.
And the second question?
What about the role of men? This is an important research question, I think. I can only say really a suggestion would be to look at different strategies for the role of men. And I was thinking of introducing the concept of fast cooking and slow cooking for this. So if you can imagine fast cooking is strategy you can implement quite quickly. And I brought my first prop along. Fast cooking is This is Shuriko coffee, which is from Bali. Shuriko is the company that trades in this coffee, and some of their members are present at the forum. So this is basically the idea here is that it's cooked quickly. 10 or 15 minutes, the coffee's roasted. So this represents a quick strategy. And so, as for the role of men, this could be, having a constructive dialogue between women and men about sharing the burden of household and care, domestic sort of tasks more equally, so it doesn't. It's not biased against women, and so that everybody can really benefit from the opportunities that women have to improve food security. Okay.
Great.
The second prop. Sorry. I haven't finished. It's the slow cooking. The slow cooking is represented by this bag of rice, which is a main staple food, and it takes a longer time to cook, maybe an hour or something. So here's the rice. And as for men, the role of men, a more longer-term strategy is men and women working together to overturn some of the discriminatory customs and laws that are often in place, like land inheritance rules which discriminate against women, or discrimination in employment opportunities for women in the agricultural sector. So in conclusion, it's both fast and slow cooking, both longer term and short term strategies that I think can move towards more gender equality and women's empowerment.
Thanks very much, Richard. Very instructive. I think you have an ingredient to share as well.
Yeah, this is a seed pack, not particularly from that home garden project, but just a seed pack in general. So it signifies woman's reproductive domain, cooking, taking care of family, feeding the family, caring for children. So there's a lot of progress has been made in terms of gender equality in economic and productive sphere, but try to change gender role in reproductive domain, particularly in this part of the world, is still a big challenge. Reproductive means woman is still primary caretaker of the family. So men, most of the time, they don't enter the kitchen, especially men in the rural areas. So it's really, it's the kind of sphere that it's woman dominated, and we've been talking about changing gender role for like 100 years. Little progress have been made. So we'd like to see change happening in that domain.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so that is it. Okay, so let's add more flavors, Natalia.
Yeah. So our special guest has just arrived. Not Agos, sorry. He's also special, but Oliver Johnson has just arrived. Those that don't know, he's just relocated from the Africa Centre to the Asia Centre, which is why he was late, because it's a long way to come. So welcome to the show, Oliver. So now I'm going to move on to gender interventions. So a lot of the programs and interventions that are now currently occurring in today's society, or doing things that isn't really what I'm trying to say. I'm going to start again. There are many programs and interventions that are trying to be more socially inclusive and focus on gender equality. For example, the SDGs, which we talked about yesterday, and the Paris Agreement as well. But this often remains a challenge and is often quite elusive. So I have some questions for Kalpana and Oliver, so it's good that you've come in time. So, Kalpana and Oliver, your projects focus on current technical efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change, such as through cleaner energy transitions, Oliver, and through climate finance, Kalpana. Despite these good intentions, social inclusion and gender equality seem to remain elusive goals. Can you offer explanations as to why this is so? Kalpana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think to better respond to that question, I would like to throw two statements to the audience and want to hear their response on this. Suppose that you are a climate change person and you are offered to choose between the two projects. One project, which is designed to yield carbon emissions, is the major goal, and it does something on social goal. Okay, what is that something? We don't know yet, but it does something. And then you have a second project, which is designed to achieve social development goals and also carbon emission goals. So if you were asked to choose between one of those two projects, which would you prefer to choose? Okay, so you have two projects to choose from. The first project is designed to gain carbon emission goal, is the primary goal, and it does something on social goals. What are the social goals? It's not explicitly mentioned. And then you have a second project, which is designed to achieve social development as well as the carbon emission goals. Which of these two projects would you choose? Yes, please. Second, why would you, okay, let me see from the others. Yes, Richard? Sorry, Patrick. Second. Anyone going for the first? Second? Okay.
I'm not quite sure whether you're stating there's a trade-off between these two or not, because in the second one, it seems like there isn't a trade-off, and the first one there is. So obviously, I would choose the second one. Sorry.
Okay. Janice.
I think I will ask more questions before I choose whether then it impacts other environmental sector or other sectors. Because it's really hard to believe that there's any option that we have left for all sectors, or maybe a lot of investment that we cannot afford.
Well, thank you so much. You know, I would really want to take all of you to the Green Climate Fund discussion, where these two scenarios that I just gave you were given to the Secretariat, and they were asked to choose one of the two options to be used as the M&E framework for the GCF operations. And their response was they choose the first one. Okay? So perhaps we should, as a ACI team, should go and visit GCF team. Why do I want to bring to you these two options is, I think that is, the answer actually lies in there on how the technical sector is actually considering integrating gender or any other social development goal into its operation. And I would like to give you a flavor of the research that I did, which is looking at gender lens, looking with the gender lens on the climate finance operations. So what I basically looked at is how much of money, climate finance money, is tagged also for gender. And then how much of these gender tagged projects actually operate in practice. So 4 findings actually emerged out of that study. 1, the gender tagging does help for projects to initially think about gender issues, right? So because there is a tagging, so projects actually discuss within their project team and try to make a sense of how does that gender make sense to our technical projects. So there's this engagement process that does begin, which is a positive sign. And when they do that deliberation, what was quite interesting was that they really think about right issue, you know, and they really think about inclusion issues. And they really think about all the regional mandates and the climate change mandates and UNFCCC clauses on gender equality and social goals. So the rationale, if you read the project rationale on why they should be thinking about gender, it will just blow your mind, right? It's so inclusive. Now what happens when they start to think about the project activities for actual implementation? All that somehow vanishes. And they would come up with 3 types of activities. I'm just giving the prototype. 1, they will do random gender activities or social activities. So for example, they will bring, let's say, women, underprivileged, disabled people in their meetings because they wanted to show it is inclusive, which has nothing to do with the project outcome that they are trying to achieve. 1, random, very random. Second, they do some silo activity, which means sometimes they would do leadership training for, let's say, very marginalized foresters in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. But again, these activities are not tied to the overall results that the project wants to achieve. So what happens is that they are not measured by the M&E system, and all that innovation in the result that could have emerged from that intervention is lost. The third type of intervention is the one where the project deliberately tries to link gender agenda with the type of results that they want to see down the 5 years in line. And they say, okay, this is the gender issue that this project is going to address. These are the lenses that we are going to measure, monitor, and report back. And in those projects, you can actually see some of the gender equality issues being addressed. Now, in terms of the results, when the results are actually reported back to donors or to the scientific community, what actually happens is most of the changes that occur, it does occur on very practical level of project intervention. So if it's a climate change project that works on capacity building, then they would report a number of women and men that were trained in their technical trainings. And that is reported as a result. The gender mainstreaming processes and activities that is employed by the project is also reported as results, which is like, yeah, this project actually developed a gender mainstreaming strategy, and that's a result. That's a gender result, okay? So, I mean, we can be critical, but I think one of the good or the positive thing that all this intervention does, it actually tries not to create further gaps that are already there in between different gender and social issues in relation to the technical intervention that the project is doing. So basically, it achieves to do no harm to the existing inequalities that are out there, okay? Now, if you look at the system of accountability from the donor side, it was quite interesting to find out that the system of accountability on donor actually counts the very processes that the projects employ to develop gender-sensitive strategy is the outcome, is the gender outcome. And at best, they count the numbers of women and men, numbers of different sex and age, in some cases, disaggregated data. So that is the result for them. So there is really not a systematic thought that is actually given even within the donor system on how or what is the type of gender results that they would really like to see through this technical intervention. So then, relating back to the question that you asked, Natalia, I think I would really like to make this distinction very clear and loud in rethinking and asking that, what is the gender agenda in the technical interventions? Why are we bringing the GSE initiatives into it? Are we clear about the results that we want to see in 5 or 10 years when we interact with these technical interventions or not? Or are we just trying to make it look much more aesthetic? And I think, if you look at the practice of technical projects intervention, it is still very much at the aesthetic level until we get a clarity of the changes that we want to see in gender results. It's still going to be aesthetic. It's still going to be elusive.
Thank you, Kalpana. Same question to Oliver.
Thank you. The research that we did took place last year in Zambia, looking at in rural north Zambia a solar mini grid, 60 kilowatts, aimed for 400 households on a rural fishing community called Mpanta, and the mini grid was funded by UNIDO, but developed by the Rural Electrification Authority. I think the reason that the technical efforts such as these fail or find it elusive to achieve gender and social equity goals is because they're technical interventions and they presume sort of technology neutrality. That's it. It's just they're gender blind in that sense. I think the way we explored the case was through viewing this as or viewing a change in the energy system as a change in energy culture, and the energy culture was made up of material culture, which was technology and infrastructure, practices and norms. And so with an intervention that is purely an intervention around the material culture, the technology and the infrastructure, what we found is that the norms and the practices in many cases had not changed, especially the underlying norms and practices within the community. So the best example of this is that although there was electricity within the community, to businesses, because of the various roles, norms around the behavior of women, or the roles that they should play, the business opportunities that they had were typically around selling fruits and vegetables, which they did under trees or wherever they happened to be, whilst doing all the other activities that were expected of them, which means they had no structure, no physical structure with which to electrify for the benefit of their business, whether it was to have lighting or whether it was for refrigeration. The men, on the other hand, their businesses all typically happened within a physical structure which could be electrified, be it a barber shop, be it a small goods store, or be it somewhere where they would have refrigeration. So they heavily benefited from the intervention, this new technology providing electricity to the local community, much more than women. The intervention was never geared around, well, I think there was an assumption that it would energy access for all type of thing, but not realizing that as a technical intervention, without taking these things into consideration, the norms and the practices, the intervention around technology is not necessarily going to have benefit all equally. And what we then, it made us think about, should this be should you have gender-focused energy interventions? So you might, or should you have that? You might think of that as the ratatouille that you're creating there, the pot where you have everything in one, or do you have tandem interventions? And actually, this is what we're hearing and learning about energy access in general, because it's a means to an end, the end being improved education, well-being, health, income generation, and so on. So do you have your energy interventions, which may be technical, with tandem interventions geared at improving accessibility, improving or changing norms, behaviors, practices as well, which would be maybe a more tapas approach with lots of things to choose from.
Thank you, Oliver. So what ingredients did you bring to the table? Some tapas, perhaps?
I wish. Well, my shipment's still on the way, so unfortunately, all those ingredients. But what I will give you is my phone, which is very edible, to put in there, because...
Perhaps I can just take that.
Yes. as a sign of a kind of electrified life.
So I have two ingredients, because I think in my project what I basically did was I was trying to engage gender with finance, which is a coin here, right? But I just want to make one point, which is that, there is a cooking pot, and this cooking pot, the recipe for the cooking, the recipe for the meal has already been written, okay? So the cooking pot belongs to finance, let's say, or any other technical sector, and the recipe is already written. Then the gender person is asked to come and make the recipe or the food looks interesting or appealing, okay? So what I'm trying to say here is that there is a very limited space for engagement to integrate gender and social issues in the technical cooking pot, and that needs to change if we really want inclusive outcomes.
So I'm just going to turn down the heat for a few minutes and let it simmer. And while we do that, perhaps we'll open up the floor for some questions, if anything has come up. Yeah.
Thanks. I have many questions, but I think I'll first ask the most burning one. So I think this is the first time so far in the forum that this room is filled with a majority of women. And it could be, I suppose, for two reasons. One is that women care more, and the other is that men care less. or that there's a climate change, and that's also really important, and that's the competing session. But my question is that even within SEI and also outside of SEI, how do we instill the same sense of responsibility in men that we have as women to change these issues around gender?
Should we start with you, or should we? Yeah. Why is this? So what are we going to do? Anyone? Sorry. Maybe it's unanswerable. Can anyone provide any insight into that question? Or maybe you might talk about why. Can you say something?
Well, I think the word you used, instill, was quite an interesting one, because I think that is the challenge. This requires, okay, within, let's think beyond SEI, but within male members of the society, and as broad as you want to go, globally or whatever, what is it that makes men think about these issues and take them seriously? It's so complex. I mean, you could have a range of different men in the room who might answer from different perspectives. Was it something to do with your upbringing, your mother, a certain something happened, some certain event which made you think about that? I think at the same time, I think it would be very valuable to reflect, even personally, on that. I don't know if I could do that right here, and it would take a bit of time to think about how I would do that, but I think it would be a valuable exercise. So I won't pontificate, but it is complex, and it's difficult for me. I'm very interested in these issues, and then trying to say, why is it? Because I have a mother, I have a wife, I have a sister, I'm about to have a baby girl. Is it these issues, or is it because I also have brothers, I have a father, and I think I've seen, engaged with issues or spent time with men who say negative things about women and things like that. I can't explain exactly, and so that's very difficult. I'd like to think it was something about my upbringing and culture and background, but then I wouldn't want to say that's the only thing. I don't know.
I think Rob had a comment or a new question.
Yeah. Yes. So my question, which is on the same lines, and then I can perhaps try and begin to answer it from my perspective. But my question, I thought, was very interesting. We began to touch upon ideas of how to be norm critical, because then we get away, perhaps, or we expand from just talking about empowering women, which I think it has a limited shelf life. I think it goes so far, but it doesn't address the fact that empowering women may also need to be coupled with a redistribution of power. That means perhaps relinquishing power that men have. And you can't get around this without looking at real structures of power and where they reside and how they are created. So my question was really, and I think that Richard started to touch upon this, is what is the enabling environment to allow men and women to be norm critical? And that, I think, is actually about establishing, certainly to a certain degree, a legal framework to enable it. And as someone who's just come back to work, having spent 7 months off looking after one of my kids, that's because there is a legal framework that allows me to do that. So I really think that you've got to look at what is the enabling environment to be norm critical. Any ideas, I'm welcome for that.
Yeah, hi. Probably quite similar to Rob, to be honest. So this session was gender and social equity, as I understand it. But I suppose my observation is that I've heard a lot about gender and empowerment, and I haven't heard much about social equity. And for me, I've always been a bit concerned with this concept of empowerment, because and to a certain extent focus purely on gender, because I find it a little bit reductionist and binary, whereas I think social equity, which can obviously involve gender dynamics and power relations, incorporates a lot more, and it demands more of the researcher and observer to look at social equity questions. Whereas if you just make a normative assumption that gender is, which often is the case, is the principal component that is explaining differences, then I think you can kind of be driven forward by that paradigm. Whereas I think if you are braver and focus more on social equity, I think it can be a richer discussion. I also feel that it can be, in the work that I've done, a much more positive discussion with communities at a local level when you talk about social equity questions or human rights questions or empowerment across the board rather than questions between men and women. It comes across as less threatening in my experience. So I'd just be interested to hear a bit more emphasis on social equity as opposed to purely on gender.
Okay, I think I would quickly react to that. I think we're talking potentially about two different issues here. So I think the gender issues is actually rather important, and I would like to see it really directly addressed within SCI. And I do like what Rob said. So what is really, how can we make sure that we have basically an enabling environment really to discuss this, and basically discuss it really from a point of view that all of us come equally to the table, so to speak. And I do wonder, and I know that we had these discussions within SCI for a few years now, whether it would help if we had more female seniors working for SCI, for example. It would be interesting, for example, to have an executive director, the next one, who would be female. And I think really it is about just nurturing this environment where you just see that it's absolutely, it's absolutely normal. And I think it's no, how can I say it? I think we are getting to a point, I think, where we have to do what we preach, basically, and I would really like to see in the senior management a better representation of females.
Does anyone in the panel have any responses to any of the comments made?
Go ahead. Yeah. Kind of reflection on Rob's comment about redistribution of power. Yeah, I think if we see power as the power to make decision, to decide certain things, to impose someone's wish over somebody else's life, for example, then if we see power that way, then empowerment means, you will be, like, certain group will be robbed away, that kind of power. But if we see empowerment, I mean, I'm not going into the theory of empowerment, but the way we development actors deal with it is to, if we try to share aspiration, for example, if we look at the family level, if we share aspiration, then maybe the talk of empowerment will not be like, will get men involved in that kind of I don't know, way to kind of achieve their shared aspiration. So in that sense, if empower women become less threatening, if we frame it in the sense that we should share a common goal, common interest, and how to do that, if by empower women, by improving women's skill, get women more exposed to social and political sphere, for example, will have them achieve that goal, then it will be less threatening. You seem not agree. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond really quickly to your comment about doing what we preach, because I think that's really powerful. And just from personal experience working in Latin America, where there's not necessarily very many women in leadership roles or in technical roles, when me or my project managers who are women go in and, you know, stand in front of the room as technical experts and project managers, I think that's really powerful. And that's for both the men to rethink and for the women in the room. So I just want to thank you for your comment.
I think I would really like to retouch on the role of men within SEI particularly, because I joined SEI like a year ago. And you know, one thing that I really can say for sure, especially for the Asia colleague that I work with, is people here are very open and they're very candid and honest when it comes to talk about gender equality, right? So you do not really deal with this personal resistance from male where you have to convince them and bring them on board and say that this is important, right? No, you know, I really appreciate that, okay? Michael, you are here as the representative. So I really wanted to like say that, you know, they understand the issue and they think that it's really important and we need to talk about it, right? So the personal buy-in is there. Now, how do we convert this individual willingness into institutional enabling environment? That's the question, right? So then I would look back and really say and challenge people asking, okay, whenever we think about ACI vision, what is the gender vision looks like for ACI? How does the gender vision looks like for the projects or the initiatives that we are working on? You know, can we actually discuss on that? Can we have an open discussion, you know, open platform to discuss on which objectives should be prioritized, what approaches should be adopted? So I would say that perhaps we need to push our boundaries on how we think and practice of transdisciplinarity within our work. Sometimes we are multidisciplinary, you know, we work with different sectors and teams and experts. But I think we need to reframe our discussion and say, why are we bringing all this different expertise on the table? Are we actually rethinking about the agenda on the table? Or are we just serving the agenda which is already brought on the table? And I think if we are open to do that, perhaps then we can link back to the organizational enabling environment, because people here are, I think, limited by the organizational, perhaps not clarity on what it means to SEI as well. I mean, I'm not clear as well. That's one. And the other thing that I wanted to say about gender and social equity is either, which is more important, either a binary perspective or a multidimensional perspective. And you know, it's always a reflection on that end, and sometimes we feel like perhaps a multidimensional perspective is much more enriching. Yes, if you look it from a research perspective, definitely yes, right? Because you can, given an opportunity, you can actually address different sectors of power that could emanate from different sectors rather than just from masculinity or femininity. But then, if you look at the practice and if you look at the region, then there are certain gender issues which are very much valid and real. And because of that, even if we do let's say, a multidimensional assessment of power analysis, gender issue could come up as one of the key issues that merits attention. So I think we need to see that as well as important, as one of the important insights, you know, and on why gender issues also merits attention on the table. Thanks.
Really quickly. So yes, I think that there are things that SEI can do to look at the way that it can become institutionally better at dealing with issues about the visibility and empowerment of women as research and as managers within the organisation. And the point about there are lots of women here and there are loads of men in there is one that we as communications come up with all the time. We're always looking for someone to talk about SEI or climate research or anything to do with climate who's a woman. And there aren't that many, actually. Yes, if you can cut it through water or something else, but often it's the men who are there. And I don't know whether that's about SEI, about the recruitments we're making, or whether that's something about climate researchers or as a field. It's something that because we really want to lift up women researchers in the media as spokespeople for SEI and give much more visibility to that. And that means, from an institutional point of view, investing in training of everybody, but particularly perhaps offering that training to women and younger researchers. So that's an institutional effort that I think SEI can make in one area.
Okay, I think we should wrap this up. I mean, a lot of things have been discussed actually, and it just goes to show how gender has so many flavors. The issue of representation, the whole debate on intersectionality, whether social equity versus gender. There are many, even within the ranks of gender studies, it is a standing debate. Also, the idea of technology and the social, looking at technology as being actually socially embedded. A sociologist many years ago had said. So we do have many flavors, as well as an enabling institutional environment for gender equality, which means that our pot is probably simmering with something very, very interesting here because of all those multidimensional flavors, intersectional layers of gender. So this is what we came up with. How many of you know the city of Bangkok very well? No, not very, okay, Kalpana. Did you know that if you go downtown, you will find love potions? Love potion number 2, love potion number 5. This is the gender equality love potion. Once you drink it, you will be assured of gender sensitivity and absolute inclusiveness. And it's very wicked. It does wicked things to you. It makes you absolutely inclusive. So, thank you to all of you. Please have a sip, if you dare, at your own risk. Okay, thank you again so much for the spirited audience that we had, and of course, all the work that you've been doing on gender and social equity. Thanks so much.